Hello witches! If you don't know me, I'm Tiffany of Bewitching.Bemused. Today we're going to talk about the history of Imbolc. As always with my history videos, before we begin, if you are looking for spells to do, activities to do, ways to decorate your altar, and correspondences for this Sabbath, please check out my video on celebrating Imbolc that I made last year. It is linked down below in the description box. Also in the description box is a list of resources intended to help you continue your study of the Sabbaths and the history of the Sabbaths, particularly because I like to try to keep these videos concise. Well, relatively concise given how much information is out there. So be sure to check the resources out. So Imbolc or Imulg or Candlemas or Candlemas or Bridget's Day or February Eve or what a shocker. We once again have a Sabbath that is called by several different names. Today I'm just going to call it Imbolc. This Sabbath typically is celebrated on February 1st in the Northern Hemisphere. However, it has been known to fall on January 31st or February 2nd or be celebrated for all 3 days straight through. It is a cross-quarter day falling roughly halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. Just like all the other cross-quarter days, Imbolc has predominantly Celtic roots, and in Ireland it was considered the start of spring. But as for where it stands in the solar cycle and in the symbolism of the life cycle, the sun was reborn at the winter solstice and is now gaining in strength as the days are getting longer and nights are getting shorter. Winter and the darkness are receding, and the spring and the light are rolling back in. For many, the time around February 1st is the absolute peak of winter, and so Imbolc sits there as a beacon of hope in the darkness. So yes, for many, it is very, very frigid outside at this time of year. But little signs of life are about to start peeking through the snow soon if they aren't already. Here in California, Imbolc is supposed to be about the time of our heaviest rainfall, and it used to be prior to global warming. That's sort of hit and miss depending on the year nowadays. I laugh, but it's sad. But when we are getting hit with rain season, all the while as the rain is coming in, we are seeing lush greenery coming up around us. But that might sound kind of weird to people who live in areas with heavy snowfall. To be honest, Imbolc is sort of an odd duck of a Sabbath because it presents so differently just depending on where you live. Before I really dive in, I have to admit, there isn't a whole lot to dive into. How this day was celebrated by the ancient pagans is quite a mystery to us in the present day. In my years of celebrating the Wheel of the Year and the different Sabbaths, I have found that pagans celebrate and view this particular Sabbath in a much wider variety of ways than any other Sabbath. A good amount of our contemporary traditions regarding this day are actually pulled from Christian traditions. But hold on, before you go turning your nose up at that or at this Sabbath for that reason, let me be clear. Just because there's overlap does not invalidate this day of celebration. The overlap is there because of the common root symbolism. They just ended up being packaged differently. I'll explain that a little better as we go along. But first, let's look at some of the various names, Imulg being one of them. Imulg is thought to have meant in the belly, which feels right because the earth is pregnant with all this life that it will soon be giving birth to in the spring. To be fair, that translation is somewhat debated, but on the other hand, even if it's an inaccurate translation, it is a pretty accurate description. The word Imbolc is linked to milking, as in the lactation of farm animals, particularly sheep, as well as purification. Which brings us to Candlemas or Candlemas, which takes place on February 2nd. It is also known as the Feast of the Purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary. It started in Greece in the 4th century as a day for purification and the return to light. It was adopted by the Catholic Church in the 7th century and is commonly a day to hold purification rituals and candle blessings. It's funny because when I say purification rituals and candle blessings, my mind doesn't go to Catholic Church. It goes to pagans and witches, but I do not know why Christians damn rituals so much when they seem to love them. But I digress. To be fair to Christians, Candlemas or Candlemas, we're just gonna call it Candlemas, Candlemas was not a Christianization of Imbolc, at least as far as we can tell. It just happens to fall around the same time. No dates were shifted around to make it work in the way that things were for certain other ancient pagan celebrations to Christianize them into what we now know of as contemporary Christian celebrations. So like I said earlier, it's symbolism of essentially the same root thing packaged differently. Candlemas is the return to the light of Jesus, but for pagans it would be the return of the light of the sun. Groundhog Day, which takes place in the US and Canada on February 2nd, actually originated with the Pennsylvania Dutch, who have their own witchcraft traditions, which we'll get to, but in a totally different video. And Groundhog Day is believed to be an adaptation of a German Candlemas tradition. But of course, we can't talk about this day without talking about the Celtic goddess Brigid, or Breed as many call her. I'm just gonna pronounce it phonetically. Please forgive me. I know there are diehards that will only say Breed, but to be fair, her name can be pronounced either way. Like I said earlier, Imbolc's kind of an odd duck Sabbat, and this is one of those other things that set it apart. It heavily regards and its celebrations are heavily influenced by a singular deity versus an archetype or a group of deities that all represent similar things. This is just going to be a quick summary of this goddess, as this is not a video on Brigid, and I'm definitely not an expert on Brigid, so please forgive me. Brigid is the greatly revered Celtic goddess of the forge, healing, poetry, domestic animals, protection, and teaching. It was believed that Brigid's light would rejuvenate the earth come the spring and remove the darkness cast by winter. The Catholic Church later morphed her into Saint Brigid, who was the patron saint of nuns, newborns, midwives, dairymaids, and cattle. It's heavily believed that there was never actually a human named Brigid who became a saint, but it is up for historical debate. But there is a lot of overlap in the mythology regarding the human saint and the Celtic goddess, both by the name of Brigid. So much overlap that we know that the goddess was swept up in the Christianization of the time and region. Now, there's still a lot of mystery surrounding the goddess Brigid, such as how far out she was actually worshipped. Was it all of Europe, or was it limited to a particular region of Ireland? There may have also been either several goddesses named Brigid worshipped throughout the British Isles, connected or not, or just the one, or they're different aspects of the same goddess. We just don't really know. The Catholic Church named February 1st as Brigid's feast day, or St. Brigid's Day, and that has been absorbed into modern paganism. So like I said, regarding all the celebrations around this time, there is a lot of overlap with the Christians. But if you observe, worship, or leave out offerings for Brigid at this time, do ritual in her name or in her honor, or you spend Imbolc cleansing and purifying, don't feel like you just need to cast those traditions away just because there is some overlap with the Christians. Unfortunately, Imbolc is one of those Sabbats where we are the most limited on historical information of how the ancient pagans celebrated. But there's really nothing wrong with that. It makes it one of the most flexible Sabbats to observe. So, you know, have fun and celebrate however you like. But like I said, I do have a video with recommendations of how you can celebrate, so that's linked down below. You can check it out. This is probably my shortest Sabbat history video, and I'm so sorry for that, but we're just really lacking on information. However, I did summarize a lot of the research that I did, so if you want to read further, like I said, the resources are linked down below. There are both books as well as articles. Thank you all for watching. I wish you all a blessed Imbolc. I will see you next week. In the meantime, stay magical.